Tran Nam used to be a chief engineer at a large corporation, living a life that many people dream of: high salary, stable job, and respectable position. Every morning, he drove his car through busy streets, entering a high-rise building where hundreds of employees bowed their heads. Important meetings, valuable contracts, and compliments from superiors made him believe that he was on the right track. But life is unpredictable. One day, after finishing a big project, Nam received a text message from the HR department. There is an urgent meeting at 2 p.m. Please attend. A feeling of unease welled up, but he told himself there was nothing to worry about. Entering the meeting room, the atmosphere was strangely heavy. The HR director pushed a stack of documents toward him, his voice cold. "We are sorry, but the company has decided to terminate your contract starting today." Nam was stunned. Violating internal regulations, not meeting job requirements? The lifeless words on the paper were like a knife. "I have worked here for 10 years, contributed a lot. Now you guys kick me out with just a piece of paper?" he growled. But the answer was only silence and emotionless eyes. Nam left the company in confusion. His colleagues bowed their heads. No one dared to come near. He drove home, his mind blank. When the door opened, the wife who had been with him through so many years, ran out to greet him. "Why are you back so early?" she asked, her eyes worried. "You lost your job?" Nam replied, his voice choked. Mai paused for a moment, but then she held her husband's hand. "It's okay, we'll find another way." They didn't expect that this was just the beginning of a real storm. For the first 2 months, Nam tried to appear calm. He sent out resumes everywhere, called old connections, but the job market did not welcome a recently laid off engineer in his late 40s sass. Savings dwindled, bills piled up. By the 5th month, the landlord was knocking on the door demanding overdue rent. With no other choice, they moved into a cramped room with patchy walls and a leaky roof every time it rained. Nam threw himself into any job that would earn money. Porter, construction worker, manual laborer. One day, his hands bled from carrying cement under the hot sun, but he did not stop. The most painful thing was not poverty, but Mai's eyes. They had dreamed of a complete family, had saved up to treat infertility, but now, even that dream had become a luxury. "Do you regret it?" Mai asked one night, her voice trembling. Nam looked out the window, the streetlights casting faint streaks of light. "No," he replied, "but I feel helpless." Then one day, when Nam thought he had hit rock bottom, fate pushed him onto a different path. That morning, he walked past a roadside dump, his heart heavy after being rejected for a porter job. The stench was overwhelming. Stray dogs rummaged through the trash. Amidst the chaos, a faint sound rang out. A cry. Nam stopped, straining his ears. The cry was clearer, coming from an old cardboard box in the middle of the trash. He walked over, his hands shaking as he opened the lid. Inside, 4 newborn babies were huddled, their skin purple from the cold, wrapped in dirty cloth. His chest tightened. "Oh my God, are they humans?" he stuttered. One of them moved slightly, her tiny hands trembling. They were slowly losing strength. Without hesitation, Nam took off his coat and wrapped the 4 children, rushing to the nearest medical station. The wind whipped in his face, the rain drizzle, but he did not stop. "Emergency!" he shouted as he rushed into the clinic. The nurses rushed to pick up the bundles, stunned by the sight of the tiny creatures. "Babies abandoned in the rain," a doctor said, his eyes grave. "You got them in time, but they are very weak." Mai rushed to the hospital after Nam's urgent call. "4 babies?" she asked, her mouth agape. Nam nodded, telling her everything. Looking through the glass window of the emergency room, where the 4 babies lay in an incubator, Mai trembled. "What do you mean?" Nam swallowed. "I don't know, but I can't leave them." Mai covered her face. "We can't even take care of ourselves." But when Nam asked, "If they die, will you live in peace?" she froze. They decided to stay, staying up all night with the fragile creatures. After 48 hours, the doctor announced that the 4 children were out of danger, but still needed to be monitored. The police arrived, confirming that they had found no clues about their parents. "If no one takes them, they will go to foster care," the lieutenant said. Nam shivered at the thought of crowded, deprived orphanages. He turned to Mai. "We can't put them there." Mai's eyes widened. "You want to adopt? Are you crazy?" But Nam's determined gaze kept her quiet. They signed up for temporary care, facing a series of legal procedures and the suspicion of welfare workers. When the 4 children were brought back to the cramped, rented room, Mai held one, trembling, feeling the small warmth. "Name them," Nam said. Mai smiled. "Ha, strong as a river, been for a peaceful life. Lin, strong and wise, because fragile but will shine." The first night, the room was filled with cries. Nam and Mai were struggling with milk, diapers, and fitful sleep, but they did not give up. Nam rushed to the market to find a job carrying goods. Mai took on laundry and ironing. When the 4 children had a high fever, they ran across the street to the clinic, their hearts pounding. "Weak resistance, must be closely monitored," the doctor said. Looking at the drops of fluid falling, Mai burst into tears. I'm scared. Nam squeezed his wife's hand. We have to keep going. Time passed and difficulties piled up. Ha had a congenital heart defect, Bin had digestive problems, Lin had weak lungs, and Vi was anemic. If they had enough nutrition and care, they would still have a chance, the doctor said. But the hospital bills ate up all of Nam's earnings. He threw himself into dangerous jobs, carrying contraband, driving through the night, even fighting for a job. Mai cried, I don't want my child to grow up with a father who risks his life every day. Nam closed his eyes. I can't stop. Gradually they changed. Nam studied to get a truck driver's license, found a more stable job. Mai opened a small bakery, working day and night. The 4 children grew up in poverty, but laughter began to ring out. Ha learned to roll over. Bin slept better. Lin giggled. Vi babbled dad. Each small step was the motivation for them to continue. As the years passed, Nam and Mai not only raised 4 children, but also helped them pursue their dreams. Ha went to art school. Bin won a sports scholarship. Lin studied literature. Vi worked in social work. One evening, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. Mom and Dad gave us more than a roof over our heads, Vi said, his eyes shining. Nam smiled. You guys just need to live well. Many years later, the 4 brothers returned to visit their parents in the small house that had now been renovated. Ha brought paintings, Bin talked about his students, Lin held a new book, V talked about the community project. Nam and Mai sat there, their eyes shining with pride. From that year's garbage dump, they had built a family, not with bricks and stones, but with love and determination. The day the 4 children were brought back to the cramped rented room, Nam and Mai stood silently watching the little creatures lying on the old mattresses they had hastily spread on the floor. The room was less than 10 square meters wide, the walls were stained with old rainwater, and the smell of mold wafted in the air. The electric fan whirred, blowing across the purple skin of the 4 children who had just escaped the scythe of death. Ha, Bin, lent Vi the names they gave them in the faint hope that they would grow up healthy, even though the reality before them was a bleak picture. The first night was a nightmare. Ha's cry rang out like a signal to start. Before they could comfort her, Bin joined in, then Lin, and finally Vi, a chaotic chorus of hunger, cold, and confusion. Nam rushed to hug Ha, his hands clumsily patting her back, while Mai struggled to mix milk with the cheap powder they had just bought at a nearby grocery store. Why are they crying so much? His voice hoarse with exhaustion. Mai did not answer, her hands shaking as she held the milk bottle, trying to pour the hot water without spilling it. She had never cared for a newborn before. Everything was unfamiliar. All night they took turns holding, comforting, and changing diapers, old cloth diapers cut from Nam's torn t-shirts. When Ha fell asleep, Bin woke up. When Bin was calm, Lin cried. Because she was the smallest and weakest, she just lay still, but each of her wheezing breaths made Mai's heart ache. Near dawn, when the light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the torn curtains, Nam collapsed to the floor, still holding Lin, while Mai sat beside him, eyes sunken, holding an empty milk bottle. Can we do it? She asked, her voice hoarse. Nam did not answer right away. He looked at the 4 children, then at his wife. We have to do it. The next morning, Nam staggered out, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He couldn't return empty-handed. Milk, diapers, rent, all of it weighed like boulders on his shoulders. He went to the wholesale market, where people hired workers by the day. The work was simple but hard, carrying bags of rice, moving crates, pulling carts through chaotic crowds. Sweat poured out, his hands were swollen, his back ached, but he didn't care. Every penny he earned was a hope that the 4 children wouldn't go hungry. Late in the afternoon, Nan returned with a few crumpled bills in his hand. As he pushed the door open, the sight before him made his heart ache. Mai sat on the floor, tears rolling down her cheeks, surrounded by 4 children crying. They have a fever, honey, she said, her voice trembling. Nam rushed over, touching each child's forehead. It was burning hot. Ha gasped, Bin groaned, Lin waved her tiny hands, Vi lay still, eyes closed. Without time to think, Nam carried the 2 children, Mai carried the 2 children, and rushed straight to the nearest clinic. The doctor examined them, his eyes serious. Virus. The babies were born prematurely with weak resistance, must be closely monitored. They sat on the waiting chair, hands tightly holding each other, watching each drop of fluid drip through the IV. Mai burst into tears. I'm afraid they won't make it. Nam squeezed his wife's hand, his throat choking. We saved them once, we can save them again. That night, they stayed in the hospital, not taking their eyes off their 4 little children. Only in the morning, when the fever subsided, did they dare to breathe a sigh of relief. But the ordeal was not over. The hospital bills ate up all the money Nam earned. They faced the harsh reality. The 4 children not only needed food and clothing, but also medicine and nutrition, things far beyond their means. Nam threw himself into work like a machine. Porter in the morning, construction worker in the afternoon, motorbike taxi driver at night. Some days he only slept for 2 hours. His body was exhausted, but he did not dare to stop. Mai did not sit still either. She did laundry for hire, cleaned houses for others. Her hands were chapped and red from the soap, but she never complained. Then one day, they discovered the heartbreaking truth. Ha did not drink milk from the bottle, Ben cried abnormally. Lynn had difficulty breathing because she had not gained weight even after 3 months. They took the children to the doctor. The doctor held the results, his voice low. All 4 children are severely malnourished. Ha has signs of congenital heart disease. Ben has digestive problems. Lynn has weak lungs because of anemia. Mai trembled. Can they live healthy lives? The doctor sighed. If there is enough care, there is still a chance. But if not, the sentence was unfinished, but they understood. Nam sat down on the hospital steps, his head bowed. For the first time, he felt like he might collapse. Mai sat next to him, squeezing her husband's hand. What should we do now? Nam did not answer right away. He thought about the moment he found the 4 children in the trash can. If he had turned his back, maybe things would have been different. But he dismissed the thought. I will make money, he said, standing up, his eyes red. Anything is fine as long as it has money. 2 days later, Nam returned with a bruised body. Mai was shocked. What are you doing? He took off his dusty jacket and threw a wad of money on the table. I'm fine, he said, his voice hoarse. But Mai knew he wasn't fine. He had taken on dangerous jobs, carrying contraband, driving through the night for smugglers, even fighting for a job at the dock. Is this how you make money? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Nam didn't answer. He knew that if he continued, he might not survive, but he had no choice. Mai held her husband's hand. I don't want our child to grow up with a father who risks his life every day. Nam leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. He had never felt so helpless. But time did not wait. Ha gradually learned to crawl. Ben slept better. Lynn giggled because she babbled her first sounds. Despite the deprivation, they still grew up. And that was why Nam could not stop. Nam decided to change. He enrolled in a truck driving course, a more stable job, even though he had to stay up all night studying and working. Mai applied to a bakery near her house, learned to make bread, and took orders to work at night. There were days when she needed dough, coaxed her child, and studied online. They didn't say it, but they both understood. If they didn't change, they would forever be in crisis. A year later, Nam was hired as a truck driver. The work was hard, requiring constant travel on long roads, but at least it was no longer a dangerous mission. Mai opened a small bakery on the corner. More and more customers came, not only because the bread was delicious, but also because of the dedication of a mother who had gone through hardship. The 4 children grew stronger. Despite their poor health, they began to run and laugh. One evening, Nam came home and saw Mai sitting among the 4 children. We are not their biological parents, she said, but from day one, they have been our children. Nam nodded, a warm feeling filling his chest. Time passed like a wind, carrying with it days of deprivation, but also filled with immature laughter. The 4 children, Ha, Bin, Lin, V, were no longer the little creatures huddled in a cardboard box. They began to roll over, crawl, and then take their first steps. The small rented room was now not only a shelter, but also a world full of sounds. Crying mixed with laughter, the sound of tiny feet running on the old wooden floor, and Nam's voice comforting them every time they fell. Ha was the first to walk. She was small but resilient, her eyes shining brightly every time she fell. She would stand up on her own. One afternoon, when Nam had just returned from the truck, he saw Ha standing in the middle of the room, her hands holding onto the edge of the table, then letting go, taking shaky steps towards him. Daddy, the little girl called, her voice chirping. Nam quickly knelt down, opened his arms to welcome his daughter. He fell into his arms, laughing loudly, her cheeks puffed up and red. He hugged her tightly, feeling as if all her fatigue had disappeared. Ben was slower, but the boy was stubborn. He fell continuously, crying loudly each time he fell, but never asked anyone to help him up. One day, Mai saw Ben clinging to the leg of a chair, his face red from trying, then standing up on his own. I did it, Mom, he shouted, his voice full of pride. Mai laughed, ran to hug him, even though she knew in her heart that his little arms were still weak from malnutrition since the first days of life. Lin and Vi walked behind. Lin was shy, often clinging to her mother when learning to walk, her big round eyes looking around as if afraid. But when Mai encouraged her, she dared to take steps, each step small like a timid cat. Vi, the smallest, weakest, was the one who liked to laugh the most. Every time she fell, she didn't cry but lay on her back giggling, then turned over and crawled again. Nam often joked, this little girl is truly the light of the family, but that little joy could not hide the reality. The 4 children needed food, clothes, and medicine, things that Nam and Mai had to pay for with their sweat and their health. Each of their faltering steps was a reminder they could not stop. When the 4 children turned 3, the health problems they had had since birth began to show. One morning, Mai saw Ha panting after running around the room. She quickly carried her child to the clinic. The doctor examined her, his eyes darkening. Congenital heart disease. If If not treated early, it could be dangerous. Nam stood by, his hands clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. How much will it cost? He asked, his voice hoarse. The doctor shook his head. Can't say exactly yet, but it will be very expensive. At the same time, Bin often had stomach aches and could not digest food. Lynn coughed every time the weather turned cold, and her weak lungs made her tired easily. Because he was thin, his skin pale from anemia, his big round eyes now sunken. They need better nutrition, regular medication, the doctor said. Otherwise, it will get worse. Nam and Mai sat across from each other in the rented room that night, amid the steady breathing of the 4 sleeping children. What should we do? Mai asked, her voice trembling. Nam did not answer right away. He looked out the window where the streetlights cast faint streaks of light. I will work overtime, he said, standing up. What about you? Mai asked. I will take on more work. We cannot let the children suffer any longer. From that day on, Nam worked like a non-stop machine. He drove a truck during the day, drove a motorbike taxi at night, sometimes not sleeping all night to take on more shipments. His body was emaciated, his eyes were red, but he did not complain. Mai expanded the bakery, stayed up late to take on more orders, her hands rough from kneading dough and washing dishes. One day she collapsed by the stove, still holding the ladle, but when Ha ran to wake her mother up, she smiled. Mom is fine, don't worry. Despite the hardships, warm moments still crept into their lives. One evening, Nam came home late, his shirt soaked from the rain. As soon as he walked in, Bin ran up and hugged his legs. Dad is home! Nam was stunned. That was the first time the little boy called him Dad. He knelt down and hugged Bin, feeling as if his heart had just melted. Yes, Dad is home, he said, his voice choked up. Ha was the second child. She loved to sit next to Nam every time he ate, her tiny hands holding the spoon to feed him. Dad, eat, it's delicious, Ha said, grinning. Nam looked at her, remembering the day he found her in the trash, cold and near death. Now those eyes were bright and full of life. Lynn called Mai her first mom. One day, while Mai was doing the laundry, Lynn crawled over and tugged at her shirt. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Mai stopped, tears rolling down her cheeks. She picked her up and kissed her forehead. Mommy, get me some water right now. From then on, the word mommy became a familiar sound every day. Although it was the slow bad, the moment on a sunny morning, Nam and Mai looked at each other and smiled. They were not rich, not well off, but those 4 words were the most precious asset they had. But the joy did not last long. When the 4 children turned 4, the kindergarten near their house sent a letter requesting tuition. Mai looked at the number on the paper, her hands shaking. We don't have enough money, she told Nam that night. He took the paper and sighed. I'll take on more nightly deliveries. Mai protested. You've worked too hard. I don't want you to burn out. Nam was thoughtful. He knew Mai was right, but they had no choice. The next morning, he went to a small construction company, applying for a job as a handyman on a project. You have driving experience, but how can you work on a construction site, the manager asked. As long as there's work, I will learn, Nam replied, his eyes determined. So he began a new cycle, driving during the day, working on a construction site at night. His hands were rough, his body ached, but every time he came home and saw Mai mending old clothes for her child under the dim light, he told himself he could not stop. Mai did not give up either. She learned to make cakes, taking orders from the neighbors. One day, she wrapped cakes and coaxed Vi to sleep, her hands and feet restless. One time, Ha walked into the kitchen, holding a piece of paper and scribbled, Mom, I am drawing our house. Mai looked at the picture, a big house, blue sky, birds flying. Her heart sank. As long as we are together, anywhere is home, she said, hugging her child. But Ha's eyes still shone with an unspoken longing. That month, they saved every penny, working day and night, and finally managed to pay the tuition. On the first day of school, Bin ran into the school gate, his hands raised in triumph. Lynn clung to Mai, timidly walking, because she skipped, holding onto her brother's shirt, smiling brightly. Ha was the last one, turning back and shouting, Mom and Dad, I'll try my best. Nam and Mai stood there, tears glistening in the sunlight. We did it, Nam said, squeezing his wife's hand. But they knew the road was long. The 4 children not only needed to grow up, but also needed a future, and they were willing to do anything to ensure that. Time passed, and the 4 children grew up in a small house that had now been slightly renovated. The corrugated iron roof no longer leaked. The walls were repainted, but it was still a cramped space with a whirring electric fan and the smell of bread wafting from Mai's kitchen corner. Ha! Bin, Lin, and Vi were no longer toddlers. They were 12 years old, each with their own personality, like sprouts growing from the barren land that Nam and Mai had plowed with sweat and tears. Ha was the eldest, quiet but strong. She liked to sit alone in the corner of the room, pencil in hand, scribbling on old papers that Mai had picked up from the bakery. Ha's drawings were no longer clumsy lines, but gradually took on a clear image, a big house, a green field, or sometimes the faces of Nam and Mai in the sunset. I want to learn to draw, Ha said once, her voice small but firm. Mai looked at her son, both proud and worried. Learning to draw is expensive, son, she replied, unconsciously tightening her apron. Bin was the only son, tall and active. He loved to run around in the yard, his bare feet covered in red dirt. Once, Nam saw Bin playing soccer with the neighborhood kids, running as fast as the wind, not afraid to fall. I want to be a soccer player, Bin declared, his eyes shining. Nam smiled, patting his son on the shoulder. Good, but you have to study. Understand? Bin nodded, but his eyes revealed his stubbornness. He didn't like books, only the soccer field. Lin was shy, loved books. She often sat next to Mai, reading old books borrowed from the school library. Mom, I want to write a book in the future, Lin said, her voice as soft as a breeze. Mai patted her head. Writing a book requires a lot of studying. Can you handle it? Lin nodded, her big round eyes shining with determination. She was not as healthy as her siblings, and every time she coughed, the whole family worried. But Lin's spirit was stronger than her fragile body. Vi was the youngest, mischievous, and full of energy. She liked to run after Nam whenever he fixed his old bicycle, holding a screwdriver in her hand as a right-hand man. I want to help others like Mom and Dad helped us, Vi said, smiling brightly. Nam looked at her, remembering the day he picked her up from the dump, tiny and weak. Now Vi was the little fire that warmed the whole family. But their dreams were also a new burden for Nam and Mai. They not only had to worry about food and clothing, but also had to think about the future, a luxury for a family that always lived on the brink of poverty. As the 4 children entered their teenage years, the small house began to be filled with quarrels. Ha, now 15, became increasingly quiet. One evening, she threw her pen on the table and shouted, I don't want to live like this forever. I want to learn to draw, but my parents keep saying we don't have money. Mai was stunned. Her hand holding the plate of cake stopped. Ha, I know our family's in trouble, she said, her voice choked. Ha turned away, tears rolling down her face. I know, but I can't bear to see my dream buried. Nam walked in, hearing the argument. Ha, you can't talk to your mother like that, he said sternly. Ha stood up. What about Dad? Dad works day and night, but is it ever enough? The words were like a knife stabbing Nam's heart. He fell silent, turned to the yard and lit a cigarette, a habit he had long abandoned but now returned in moments of stress. Bin was also not as easy to manage as before. He often skipped school to play soccer, coming home with torn shoes and a bruised face from fighting with older kids. I don't need to study, I just want to play soccer, he snapped when Mai scolded him. Do you think soccer can support you? Mai shouted, losing her temper for the first time. Bin kicked the door open and ran out, leaving Mai sitting on the floor crying. Lin and Vi caused less trouble, but the atmosphere in the house was still heavy. Lin read quietly, but sometimes she sighed. I want to go to college, but I don't think I can. Vi often asked, are you tired of us? Those questions were like salt rubbed into Nam and Mai's wounds. One night, when the 4 children were asleep, Nam sat across from Mai at the kitchen table. What did we do wrong? Mai asked, her eyes red. Nam sighed. No. We just don't have enough strength to give them all. But they knew, no matter how big the conflict was, they couldn't let go. After the argument with Hai, Nam decided to take action. He took on an extra night shift, driving across the province, long trips of hours on dark roads, his eyes stinging from lack of sleep. Once, he almost crashed into an oncoming car because he was tired, but he gritted his teeth and continued. If Ha wants to learn to draw, I'll take care of it, he told Mai, his voice determined. Mai didn't stand still either. She learned to make more elaborate cakes, taking orders from big shops. Her hands were blistered from the heat, but she didn't stop. One day, she brought home a small box of paints and placed it in front of Ha. I can't promise you the whole world, but I'll help you get started. Ha hugged her mother, sobbing. I'm sorry, Mom. Bin changed after a serious injury while playing soccer. Nam took him to the hospital, sat by his bed, and said, Dad doesn't forbid you from dreaming, but you have to have a way out. After you finish school, you can play soccer as much as you want. Bin looked at his father and nodded. He started to work harder, although he still sneaked out to the field every afternoon. Lin and Vi also contributed. Lin kept the books for Mai's bakery, helping her mother manage the money. Vi asked for a part-time job at a grocery store near home, collecting every penny to give to her mother, for Ha to buy paint. Seeing their children working together, Nam and Mai felt that all the sacrifices were worth it. The day Ha took the exam to enter the art school, the whole family waited anxiously. When the results were announced, she stood in front of the school gate, saw her name on the list, and burst into tears right in the middle of the yard. I did it, Mom and Dad, Ha shouted over the phone. Nam and Mai hugged each other, tears rolling down their faces. But they knew that tuition was still a big burden. Nam continued to work at night, Mai expanded the bakery, and the 4 siblings took turns working part-time. A year later, Bin received a sports scholarship thanks to his talent on the field. Lin passed the literature major with a near-perfect score. V found his passion in social work, helping disadvantaged children like himself in the past. Each of them has a different path, but all are the result of determination and family love. One evening, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. Vi spoke up. "From now on, we will help our parents live better." Nam smiled. "It's enough that you live well." Ha squeezed his father's hand, Bin patted his mother's back, Lin and Vi nodded. They knew the road ahead was long, but together, nothing was impossible. Time passed, and the four children, Ha, Bin, Lin, Vi, were no longer naive teenagers in the small house. They had grown up, each carrying their own dreams, leaving Nam in Mai's arms to face the big world. The once cramped rented house is now quieter, but memories still cling to every wall. Every corner of the kitchen where Mai used to knead dough and Nam used to fix old bicycles. Ha was the first to leave. After graduating from art school, she received a job offer at an art gallery in a big city. The day Ha picked up her painting bag and left, Nam stood at the door, his eyes red, but he tried to smile. "Be careful. Remember to come back to visit your parents." Ha hugged her father, tears rolling down her face. "I will not disappoint you." Mai handed her a box of homemade bread, her voice choked. "Eat well. Don't go hungry." Ha nodded, got on the car. Her small figure gradually disappeared into the alley. Bin followed shortly after. Thanks to a sports scholarship, he was recruited to a semi-professional soccer team. The day he left home, carrying a backpack on his shoulder, his old soccer shoes dangling, Nam patted his son on the shoulder. "Play well, but don't forget your family." Bin laughed out loud. "I will become a famous football player, then build a big house for my parents." Mai patted his head, her hands trembling. "As long as you are healthy, that's enough." Lin chose the path of education. With excellent grades, she was accepted into the literature department of a prestigious university. The day Lin pulled her suitcase to the bus station, Mai hugged her tightly. "You are my pride." Lin smiled, her eyes shining. "I will write a book about my family so the whole world knows how wonderful my parents are." Nam gave his son a pen and said, "Write really well. Okay?" Lin nodded, walking away with a dream in her heart. Vi, the youngest, chose a different path. After graduating from high school, she joined a non-governmental organization, helping disadvantaged children. The day Vi left home, she hugged Nam and Mai, saying, "I want to repay what my parents have done for us." Nam smiled. "You are the light of your parents. Just do what you believe is right." Because he skipped to the door, he turned back and waved. "I'll be back soon." The small house now only has Nam and Mai. The sound of the fan is still humming, but there is no more laughter or arguing between the four siblings. Mai sits by the kitchen, looks at the empty table, and sighs. "Our house is so quiet, isn't it?" Nam nods, pulls a chair, and sits next to his wife. "But they grew up well. That's enough." With four children gone, Nam and Mai face a new life. No more pressure to raise children, but strangely empty. Nam still drives a truck, but age has slowed him down. His back is bent, his hair is streaked with gray, and every long trip is a cry for help. Mai continues to bake, but the small stall is no longer as crowded as before. Her hands now tremble when kneading dough. The calluses remind her of the hard years. One evening, Nam sits on the porch, looking at the yard where Bin used to play soccer and Ha used to paint. "Did you ever think we would go this far?" he asked Mai, his voice low. Mai stepped out, holding a cup of hot tea. "No, but I have never regretted it." Nam held the cup of tea, the warmth spreading in his palm. He remembered the day he found the four children in the dump, cold, near death. Now, they had flown away, carrying with them the dreams that he and Mai had never dared to think of. But loneliness was not everything. Occasionally, the four siblings sent letters or called. Ha talked about her first exhibition, where a picture of her family was prominently displayed. Bin showed off a medal from a major match. Lin sent the first draft of her book with a dedication to my parents, the people who gave me the world, because then sent a photo of her standing among the orphans, smiling brightly as ever. Each news was a dose of medicine to soothe Nam and Mai's hearts. One day, at the end of the year, the sound of a car engine sounded from the alley. Nam and Mai raised their heads, their eyes shining like children waiting for presents. The car stopped, the door opened. Ha stepped down first, her bag over her shoulder, a bright smile on her face. Bin followed, taller than before, holding a soccer trophy in his hand. Lin pulled her suitcase, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Vi was the last one, jumping out of the car, waving continuously. Nam jumped up, walked quickly to the gate, hugging each child. Mai stood next to him, tears glistening, holding Ha's hand, patting Bin's cheek, rubbing Lin's head, then pulling Vi into her arms. "You guys look so grown up," she said, her voice choking. The whole family gathered around the dining table, the aroma of hot soup, braised fish, stir-fried vegetables mixed with cheerful laughter. Aunt talked about the latest exhibition, where her painting of a garbage dump, her earliest memory, was praised. "I want everyone to know our story," she said. Bin bragged about his job as a coach, how he helped poor children find their passion on the field. Lin picked up a newly published book, reading the first paragraph. From a cold garbage dump, they built a warm home with love. because she was excited about the community project where she taught the children to read and play. Nam listened quietly, his eyes filled with pride. The children he had feared would not survive had now become strong, useful people. Mai held his hand under the table and whispered, "We did it, brother." That night, the whole family sat in the yard, the sky sparkling with stars. Ha leaned her head on Nam's shoulder. "Mom and Dad have worked so hard for us." Mai smiled. "There is nothing hard about being with you." Bin put his hand on his father's shoulder. "Do you regret adopting us?" Nam turned around, his eyes determined. "From the first day, Mom and Dad have never regretted." Lin held her mother's hand. "If it weren't for Mom and Dad, we don't know what would happen now." Because looked up, Mom and Dad gave us more than just a roof, a whole life. The space was silent, only the sound of a gentle wind blowing. Ha stood up and pulled the whole family closer. "From now on, it's our turn to take care of Mom and Dad." Bin tilted his head. "At least, we will fix this house. Mom and Dad can't live in this old place forever." V crossed his arms. "Replace the roof, paint the walls, redo the electricity and water." Lin nodded. "And a new room for Mom and Dad to rest comfortably." Nam looked at Mai. She smiled, her eyes shining with agreement. In the following months, the four siblings worked together to fulfill their promise. Ha used money from the exhibition, Bin from the training contract, Lin from the book royalties, V from the community fund. The small house was upgraded, new corrugated iron roof, white walls, a small bedroom for Nam and Mai. On the inauguration day, the whole family stood in front of the door, looking at the house that used to be a shelter but now became a symbol of love and determination. Nam stood between the four children and said, "From that garbage dump to today's roof, we have come a long way." Mai held his hand, "And we have each other." Ha, Bin, Lin, V hugged their parents, their laughter echoing in the quiet night. They don't need anything more, because this family is forever the most stable place to stay. After the small house was renovated, Nam and Mai's life entered a new phase, peaceful but no less fragile. Nam is now over 50. His body is no longer as strong as before. The years of hard work to raise four children have left their mark. His back is completely bent. Each step is accompanied by heavy breathing. He still drives a truck, but only takes short trips, spending most of his time sitting on the porch, looking at the now clean and airy yard. Maya has also slowed down. Her hands that used to knead dough nonstop now tremble when holding a ladle. The small bakery stall is only open a few days a week. She likes to sit by the window, looking out at the alley where her four children used to run around, and smiles when remembering the chaotic but laughter-filled days. "Honey, are we old?" she said once, her voice as light as the wind. Nam held his wife's hand, smiling gently. "Old, but still have stories to tell." The four children occasionally came back, bringing small gifts and their own stories. Ha sent pictures to hang in the house, paintings of family memories, from the cold garbage dump to the warm house today. Bin brought old soccer balls, talking about the team he coached, his eyes shining like the days when he ran barefoot in the yard. Lin sent books, each one a piece of their story. Mai brought photos with the orphans, her smile as bright as the sun. But the peace did not last forever. One morning, Nam fell down while repairing an old bicycle, a gift he had kept since Bin was a child. Mai ran out in panic, calling the neighbors to take him to the hospital. The doctor examined him and sighed. "He has heart failure, the result of many years of overwork. He must rest completely." Mai sat by the bed, holding her husband's hand, tears rolling down. "Don't leave me, okay?" Nam smiled weakly. "You can't go anywhere yet." The news of Nam's illness spread to the four brothers. Ha left the exhibition, Bin canceled the training trip, Lin put the manuscript aside, and Vi put the project on hold. They rushed home, each of their faces tense. When they entered the small room, they saw Nam lying on the bed, breathing heavily, and Mai sitting beside him with red eyes. All four of them stood still, unable to say a word. Ha knelt down beside their father. "Dad, you have to get well." Bin held his hand, his voice trembling. "Dad is the strongest person I know. You must not fall." Lin hugged her mother, sobbing. "I haven't had time to repay my filial piety." V sat at the end of the bed, tears rolling down. "I haven't done anything for you and your parents." Nam looked at his children, trying to smile. "Dad is fine, just seeing you makes me feel better." But reality wasn't easy. The doctor said Nam needed heart surgery, an expensive operation that the family couldn't afford right away. Mai sold the bakery, collected all her savings, but still lacked a large sum. Had suggested selling paintings. Bin asked for sponsorship from the football team, Lin contacted the publisher to ask for an advance on royalties, and Tu called for donations from his organization. All four brothers jumped into action. No one wanted their parents to bear any more burden. A week later, they had enough money. Nam was taken to the operating room. Mai sat outside, clutching the rosary. she had picked up from a trip to the market years ago. The 4 siblings stood around their mother, no one speaking, just silently praying. After 8 tense hours, the doctor came out. The surgery was successful, but he needs time to recover. Mai burst into tears, hugging her children. Thank God, thank you, my children. Nam recovered slowly, but he no longer drove a truck. Ha rented a small apartment in the city for her parents, near her workplace, so they could take care of him. Bin bought a new motorbike for Nam, joking, if you can't drive a big car, ride a small one with me. Lin used the money from her best-selling book to furnish the house. Since spent the weekend visiting, bringing small gifts from the children she helped. One day, when Nam was better, the whole family gathered in the new apartment. Ha brought home the last painting she had made, an image of 5 people standing under a starry sky, with the dump where they started out behind them. This is our family, she said, hanging it on the wall. Bin talked about the youth soccer team he coached, the poor kids now having a chance to compete at a big level. Lion read the end of her new book. They didn't have everything, but they had each other, and that was enough. Because showed off her project to build a small orphanage called Mai Nia Nam Mai. Mai looked at his children, his voice warm. Mom and Dad don't need anything more than to see you live well. Mai took his hand, smiling. We've come a long way, haven't we? He nodded, his eyes looking out the window, where the sunset had dyed the street golden. One afternoon, Nam and Mai decided to return to the old dump, where it all began. They walked, hand in hand, followed by the 4 siblings. The dump had now been cleared, replaced by a small park with trees and benches. Nam stood still, remembering the day he heard a faint cry in the middle of the garbage. If I hadn't stopped that day, he said, his voice faltering. Mai squeezed her husband's hand. We wouldn't have had this day. Ha placed a small bouquet of flowers on the ground, saying, this is where we were born for the second time. Bin smiled. From the garbage dump to the soccer field, I didn't expect to go so far, Lin whispered. Every page of the book I write starts here. Because sat down, looked around. I will tell the story to other children so they know that hope is real. They stood there, 5 of them, under the red sunset. Nam turned to Mai. Do you regret it? She shook her head. Never. The 4 siblings hugged their parents, their laughter echoing in the quiet space. From that cold garbage dump, they built a family not with money, not with material things, but with love and the will to overcome all adversities. The story ends, but their journey lives on. In Has paintings, Bin's matches, Lin's books, and Vi's smiles. Nam and Mai, from a struggling couple, have become symbols of resilience and unconditional love. They not only saved 4 children from death, but also gave them a life. And in return, the 4 children gave them a real family. Under the sparkling night sky, the small house, although now changed, is still a place to preserve the memories of a magical journey. From the dump to a warm roof, they prove that as long as there is love, nothing is impossible. After visiting the old dump, Nam and Mai thought their life was truly peaceful. The small apartment in the city that Ha rented for her parents is now the place where they enjoy their old age. Nam no longer drives, instead spending time taking care of the small potted plants on the balcony. Mai still makes cakes, but only to give to neighbors as a way to keep the habit of the hard years. The 4 children often call and visit, and each time, the house is filled with laughter. But life is never without surprises. One winter morning, while Nam was watering the plants, he suddenly coughed violently and fell to the floor. Mai ran out, shouting for the neighbors. He was taken to the hospital again. The doctor examined him, his eyes serious. Heart disease relapsed, plus lung damage from years of hard work. He needs long-term treatment, but the chances are not high. Mai stood still, her hands trembling, holding her husband's hand tightly. Any amount of money is fine, save him, she said, her voice breaking. The 4 siblings rushed home again. Ha canceled an important exhibition. Bin abandoned the coaching season. Lin put her new book project on hold, and Nam temporarily suspended community work. They stood around Nam's bed, unable to say a word. Nam opened his eyes, looked at his children, and smiled weakly. Don't cry, I'm not going anywhere. But his eyes gradually dimmed. His breath was weak like a light about to go out. Mai hugged her husband, crying, You promised not to leave me. Pa knelt down. Dad, you have to live. I haven't taken you and your parents to see my biggest exhibition yet. Bin held his father's hand. I haven't had time to take you to see my football team play. Lin whispered, I haven't read you the new book yet. Because she hugged her father's leg, I haven't finished building the orphanage yet. You have to see it. Nam squeezed Mai's hand and said, Dad, I'm proud of you. That's enough. The doctor said Nam needed a more complicated surgery than the last one, and the cost was far beyond the family's means. Ha sold all the paintings in her most precious collection, even though they were her life's work. Bin signed an advertising contract with a sports brand, using the advance to pay for the hospital bills. Lin asked readers to donate online, telling her family's story to call for help. Because organized a charity event called Journey from the Dump, which attracted hundreds of participants. After 2 weeks, they had enough money. Nam was taken to the operating room. The whole family waited in the hallway. Mai sat on a chair, her hands clutching her rosary, muttering prayers. Ha scribbled on paper as a way to relieve her worries. Bin paced back and forth, his hands clenched. Lynn hugged an old book, rereading the lines about her parents to stay calm, because hummed a childhood song softly, her voice trembling. 10 hours passed, the doctor came out. He made it, but he is very weak. He needs to be closely monitored. Mai fell into Ha's arms, sobbing. The four brothers hugged each other, both happy and scared. Nam woke up after 3 days, looked at his family, and said, "We made Dad live again." Nam recovered slowly, but he was no longer the strong man of the past. He was in a wheelchair, only able to walk a few steps around the house each day. Mai took care of him little by little, from feeding him to wiping his sweat. The four brothers took turns visiting, bringing small gifts and big stories. One day, Ha organized the biggest exhibition of her career, with a theme from the garbage dump to the stars. The central painting was an image of Nam holding 4 children from the garbage pile, his eyes determined under the gray sky. Nam sat in a wheelchair, pushed by Mai, looked at the painting, tears rolling down. "You drew Dad so beautifully." Ha hugged her dad. "Dad is my hero." Ben took the whole family to the soccer field where his junior team played the final match. Nam sat in the stands, screaming his lungs out as the team won the cup. "I did it, Dad!" Ben ran up and hugged him. Nam smiled. "Dad, I knew you could do it." Lynn published the book Mai Na Nam Mai, recounting the family's journey from the dump to today. She read Nam the last part. They didn't have money, but they had love, something stronger than any adversity. Nam nodded. "You wrote very well, because the orphanage center was inaugurated, named after his parents." Nam and Mai were invited to cut the ribbon. He stood up with a cane, saying, "This is our dream. Now I'm making it come true." Nam hugged her parents. "I learned from you." One evening, the whole family gathered in the apartment. Nam sat in the middle, weak but still smiling. Mai recounted the day they found the 4 children, her voice warm. "We didn't expect to go this far." Ha said, "I will draw about my family forever." Ben added, "I will teach the children to play soccer, tell them about Mom and Dad." Lynn continued, "I will write more books." Because she smiled, "I will help many children, like Mom and Dad helped us." Nam looked at his children and said, "Mom and Dad don't need anything more. You guys are everything." Mai held his hand, her eyes sparkling. "From the dump to here, we have each other, and that's enough." The 4 siblings hugged their parents, their laughter echoing under the starry sky. The cold wind blew, but in their hearts there was only warmth. The next day, Nam passed away peacefully in his sleep, a smile still on his lips. Mai and her 4 children stood by him, not crying, just silently thanking the man who gave them a family. They buried him next to the old dump, now a park, like a closed circle. Mai whispered, "Rest in peace. We will live well." Mai lived on, cared for by her 4 children. Hao became a famous painter. Each painting is a story about family. Bean led the football team to national championship, inspiring thousands of children. Lin wrote best-selling books around the world, spreading the will of Nam and Mai. Because expanded the center, helping hundreds of children find a home. Under the night sky, the 4 brothers stood in front of Nam's grave, placing a bouquet of flowers. Ha said, "Mom and Dad gave us the whole world." Bien nodded. "We will live a worthy life." Lin whispered, "This story will never end." Because smiled, because it is love.